Hi there, my name is Kendrick, and today we're doing an interview between standard and jumper INFJs. We have two special guests today. We got Frank, James, and Joyce. So if I can get you guys to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah,
starting with Joyce.
Yep, I'm an INFJ jumper, NITI, sleep, consume, play, blast. And if you're wondering why my background is this way, is there's no internet service or cellular service in my area. Half of all of the services are off, and just when we had to do this interview. So the chaos of the world is testing me, and I am very IJ triggered right now. So, but I had to make it because it's the interview with the great Frank James, the big shot in the community. I'm like, he's just too cool to miss out on. So,
oh my gosh, stop. Yeah. Well, Joyce, I appreciate your effort in changing locations, because if that happened to me, I would be just on the floor crying. I'd be like, I can't make it. I can't do this.
I had that phase, and then I was like, all right, gotta stop freaking out.
I will be an adult. Okay. Yeah, and I'm Frank James, INFJ, and IFE, blast, sleep, consume, play, double feminine.
All right, cool. So thanks for coming, guys, and always appreciate both of you coming to the channel and getting interviewed. My first question for you guys, I want to talk about the big difference right away. Is so Joyce, you are self above tribe, and James, you are tribe above self. And my first question to you guys is, what do you think is the pros and cons of you? So for Frank, it's tribe above self, and also for Joyce, the pros and cons of being self above tribe. We're gonna go with Frank first, because Frank, you are the blaster here. So
I don't mind.
Yeah, you are. So go take it, man.
Okay, yeah. All right. So pros and cons of tribe above self. Well, as I mentioned before we hit record, when I was trying to think of the pros of being savior DE, I'm like, I don't know that there are any. So if I had to come up with one thing, I think that, when you are looking at the spectrum of the tribe, they're going to be right a lot of the time. So there's a little bit more safety there, I think. Like if you're kind of going along with basing your decisions off of that. So maybe theoretically the DEs don't go too far out on a limb and make a fool of themselves. I don't know that. I think in a practical sense on YouTube, I don't push the envelope very much. So in some ways, maybe I play it too safe, but in other ways, I'm not shooting myself in the foot, I guess, by offending the tribe or doing something that they wouldn't like, or sticking with something they wouldn't like too much. As far as the cons go, especially with TI Demon, I think it's like, I feel like I'm wrong all the time. So it's like, I know what I think will work, but as soon as other people are like, oh, actually this other thing's better, I'm like, okay, you said to do this, let's do this other thing. So there's like a constant doubt of yourself.
So in your channel, do you see yourself making videos specifically that the tribe wants? Since you're tribe above self, you pick the most popular one and then you focus on those.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to have a balance of both, because I do enjoy what I do. I like the content that I create, and I don't make stuff where I'm like, oh, I hate this, but other people like it. But it is, you have to play into what people like. So yeah.
Right. Gotcha. And what about you, Joyce?
Yeah, the pros to being self above tribe is that if there's a Nazi regimen, then you're not one of the Nazis because you don't go along with the group. Or at least you need to be the final authority to what you find to be true. And so it's like, all right, I'm going to see if this makes sense to me before I adopt this. And so that the pro of it is that you don't go along with bad tribe decisions. And the con of it is that you can be a little bit stubborn, because it has to make sense to you first for you to change how you think about something. So you're waiting until there's a convincing enough argument, at least to you, that you can reason out for yourself before you sway yourself. And so you can be a bit of a wall sometimes if you're self above tribe. Like you won't move for the tribe, especially if you're masculine TI, until you yourself are convinced to the core.
Gotcha. I think this is the perfect segue to my next question. So Frank was mentioning earlier that he second guesses himself, especially with that TI as a demon. So my next question to you guys is the FE and TI axis, okay? The good thing about both of you guys is you're both double feminine, so your sexual modalities are exactly the same. In which case you both have feminine extrovert feeling, and masculine introvert thinking. So my question for you guys when it comes to this axis is, when it comes to extrovert feeling, being feminine for both of you, do you feel like your emotions are easily moved? And how do you personally relate to that saying where your emotions are easily moved and you mirror tribe's emotions, and it's easy for you to cry, smile, whatever the tribe is doing, you're gonna mirror. And the next thing though is the masculine TI. So with TI, what I heard with people with TI is that one of the most important thing for you guys is respect. Okay, so now for Frank, you have demon TI and savior FE, and then Joyce is the opposite. So so you can also talk about the pros and cons of that as well, you know. So let's go with you first, Frank. Let's start with FE first, and then you can go with TI after.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that my emotions are pretty easily moved. And I think the other part of the feminine feeling is like what you mentioned, like the reflectiveness of other people's emotions, and kind of like it's like trying to go along with it, because you don't want to have like a disharmony between other people's feelings and yours. Or it's like you're trying to validate their feeling with yours, even if you're not interior, I don't know what the word, feeling it on the inside. It's like, okay, let me now reflect it to you outwardly. But you know, it's interesting because I've noticed that people who are blast play, like the play extroverted feelers, like it looks a lot different. It looks way more movable. But when you get a blast sleep, even with feminine FE, I've just seen in a lot of people where it's like a lot, even though they are, and I am like moving a lot with the emotions, it's not as over the top as the feminine FE blast play. Then the second part of the question with TI masculine and respect. Yeah, that's an interesting one, because yeah, I think it's respect for my way. Like, hey, I did this thing. I want you to look at that and be like, you did that the right way. You found the best way. You thought it through, and yeah, you're doing a good thing there, and being respected for that, for the work. I guess I don't know, for the accomplishment of what I figured out.
Right. Let's go with Joyce next.
Yeah, so with feminine FE, it can overlap a lot with Enneagram 9 descriptions. So whenever someone tells me that they're an Enneagram 9, I automatically assume that they might have feminine DE-like traits, like going along with other people and kind of smoothing things over, not wanting to rock the boat with the tribe. So you're flowing with the tribe, you're going with the tribe. And I think that you have a quality when you have feminine FE of when you don't have to cause conflict, you won't cause conflict. So there's a conflict aversion to it too. And so unnecessary conflict is to be avoided. And with TI in the masculine slot, what can be hard is sometimes people just telling you, oh, your logic's wrong, and then not considering all the good points that you had. It's like, wait, but I thought it through so well. You didn't address all of those premises that I had that were amazing. You just told me I was wrong. And so when people just glance over my thoughts, it's like, but you missed all the layers of amazingness. It was a beautiful crepe cake, and you just ate the first layer of the crepe, and you didn't even give it a shot. And so there can be that offense when people just kind of immediately tell you no or wrong without looking at why you thought your argument through, I guess. And then there is, what else did you ask, Kendrick?
Your feminine extrovert feeling.
Oh yes, feminine extroverted feeling. Yeah, I think some of the pros of that is that you can make a lot of people like you because you're a chameleon. And so with different groups or different types of people, you're just good at getting on their good side because you don't punch the group. And so people like people who don't punch them. I mean,
yeah, that's true. I have a follow-up question for the TIFE axis based on what you guys have said. So for Frank, I saw you were kind of like, you think things through and you want respect for your way, right? When you have the demon swing with a TI, the masculine TI comes out to like, someone's disrespecting you, like one of those TE jerks, what do you, how do you punch back, or do you not punch back? You are play last after all, so.
Yeah, I mean, me punching back is usually sort of just like, I don't know, kind of just it's not so much an active thing. It's just sort of like taking away the layer of softening what I'm saying and just saying like, well, I don't know, I guess it comes out where it's just like I'm being blunt. It's weird, like when I feel like when people expect you to be nice all the time, like when that's the pattern you have displayed, suddenly when you are just, it's not like you're rude, you're just saying something very plainly, they're like, oh my gosh. Like, yeah, my wife will be like, wow, you were being rude right now. It's like, I just said what I thought, but I didn't frame it in a nice way. Like the words themselves were not rude, but I guess I just said what I thought very bluntly. So maybe that's probably a demon swing there where it's like, no, I just, the truth has to come out, what I think.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I like the axis of the FETI because FE is the nicest sounding, but TI is the harshest sounding. So, like both of you guys have that in you, you can be the nicest person or like the harshest person, and the TI truth that like that punches, like that's like a low blow right there once you get hit by that. Yeah. All right. Joyce, you have the opposite swing from Frank. Okay, you live in TI land, right? So your swing is feminine FE, and David Chan calls it the sissy swing. So how do you personally relate to that? Like, when you get that, that swing to your FE, your feminine FE.
Interesting. Yeah, with that swing, what happens is when people try to help me too much and their help is not very helpful, it can be very annoying. So I know some savior TEs that really care about me, and sometimes they offer too much help, and it's like, well, all right, that is a lot of help. And sometimes it can get annoying because it's a surplus, and I already had it handled. And so like when they offer more than that, it's like they're making it more difficult than it had to be. So then I can get annoyed and I can snap. So that's when the FE sissy swing might come in. How do you define the sissy swing?
Like you become like a wimp, like start crying or, like hiding or like, I don't know, like I don't have feminine FE, but that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, I mean, so meltdowns, that would be quite an interesting thing to go into. I can get into a pissy mood sometimes when people don't take my NTing well. So let's take, for example, like I'm giving them a well thought through response, and it's almost like you're handing them an origami piece, and it's like this beautifully made origami piece with all the delicate folds, so that it's been folded like 200 times into this beautiful piece. And then someone just steps on it and they're like, yeah, you know what? We're just gonna go on to another topic too. So they not only disregard the TI, but they also disregard the NI because I wanted to stay with that topic. And they also just went to a completely different topic. And they also didn't consider what I had to say. So I can get a bit snapping turtle-like in mood. And that could be a little bit sissy-like, I guess.
Yeah. I think the biggest example is when what happened to your internet and power this morning. I think that's like the best example of your sissy swing. Like you told me you had a meltdown, right?
I really did, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So since you were talking about NT, I want to ask you guys about your lead animal. Okay. So Joyce, you are NT, and Frank, you are NF. So you're both INFJs, but oh my God, an INFJ cannot be an NF. Holy crap. Like that people might be like, that's blasphemy, because INFJ and NF is like hand in hand. That's like a thing, right? I want to go with Joyce first for this one. So you are NT first, and then Frank, you are NF first. NT is correlated with figuring things out, but how do you personally perceive it, Joyce, being like the lead NF person?
Yeah, it feels like you're always curious about the mysteries of the universe. It's like you can never get enough of trying to understand the world more. Like, what does this really mean? What does the world really mean? And so you're trying to puzzle out what gives the world significance, or you'll have like a piece of information, but you'll try to figure out the depth behind it. And so everything becomes a puzzle to be solved. And so there's this intellectual and cerebral element to NI and TI working together. You can always feel like you want to understand the logical links between things. And so it's this desire to figure out the theoretical intricacies that underlay existence. And that's what gives you nutrition and sustenance. It's like an itch that you always want to scratch, the NT itch of understanding things more deeply.
All right. Well, as a fellow NT, I can relate to what you're saying. For Frank, you are lead NF. You're not quite the traditional INFJ though. You're play last. So you are like a, INFJ is one of the things that, the stereotype for INFJ is like, I'm the special type. I'm the rarest type there is.
Yeah.
But Frank, your type is actually the rarest type. Because the other INFJ types, they're actually like, since David Chan kind of started typing people, there's a lot of INFJs.
Yeah.
But yours is actually the genuine. Yours a genuine rare type, right? There's like I've only interviewed like 2 of you guys.
Yeah.
And even yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, the very specific exact 512 type. There's not many people who have received that. Yeah, I was even talking to Dave once, and I was like, "Who else is my type?" And he was like, "It's not me." And it's like he was like, "Okay, I could name some people who are like the same animal stack and saviors, but it's like masculine sensory or the visual version." So it's like it's tough to find the play last double feminine NIFE. Yeah, so I'm special. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So to jump in and just answer the question about the lead NF, assuming that is what where you wanted me to go with that.
Yeah, that's where I want you to go.
Yeah, I guess it's the way that I've always, or not always, but once I learned about introverted intuition, I realized, oh, what I have been doing my whole life is finding a new situation and being like, how is this the same as something that I've already seen before? Like, how's everything basically the same thing? And then when you add the feeling on top of that, it's really concentrated on the emotional side of things. And so it makes a person very interested in like, how is everyone kind of the same? How is everyone having the same reactions to things or why is it different based on these other things? I think that's like where the interest in typology comes from. But anything that has to do with psychology and like I have a book that's like how to read anyone and things like that, where it's like I need to figure out what is the one thing. There's like a one thing more that I have to figure out before I can understand like everything about everyone, because the NI wants to make it so simple that it's like you just one more piece in there, you've got it. So Yeah, I don't, that was like a weird NF way of describing NF that probably didn't make any sense. But in a practical way, that is what's tough about being NF, is that people are like, don't know what you just said. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I have NF consume, so I'm a good translator for people. Like
Okay, good.
I have NF consume and ST blast, so I can tell to like the lead sensory. I'm like, oh, this is what they said, you know, and then I have to like translate. It's kind of weird that I have to be like translate for like NF people. It's definitely like a different language, you know. Okay, I want you guys to ask each other questions now. So this is a good opportunity to learn from your half, and I always see like jumpers and standards. Like if you guys were to merge, you become like complete, you know, like the complete. So let's go with Joyce first. So Joyce, what question would you have for Frank?
Yeah, what was most revolutionary of learning about your OPS type?
Play last, I think that explained a lot of things. I mean, I think if anything, that's the most relevant part of my type, because it explained why I just don't like why I'm so averse to interacting with people, because it just feels like you're always you're opening a can of worms anytime you have any involvement with the tribe, you know, like they're just gonna blow everything into chaos. So I've always been very selective with like leaving the house or talking to people, because, you know, even people that I know well, like friends, family or whatever, it's just like, oh my gosh, I gotta go, you know, deal with whatever they want to do. It's really weird to be play last but also save your DE, because those things are in opposition to each other. So yeah, play last, that was the biggest I mean, I understood what was going on in my life sort of, but having a specific thing to describe it, I was like, okay, well, it's starting to add up now.
I'm curious. So you're play last, and so in the YouTube space, you're big, right? But in real life, you have friends and family that don't care about personality type. So
Yeah.
And then so you're like, oh yeah, I have like this thing going on, this YouTube stuff, and they're like, yeah, whatever, you know, like, do you ever, how do you relate to that, you know, like how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, most people are interested in the YouTube stuff, but when it comes to the personality stuff, most people only have the people who do get interested in it don't understand they don't understand the complexity of it. So they'll be like, type me. And I'm like, I mean, you guys probably have the same, you know, thing happen when people find out that you're into typology. They'll be like, what type do you think I am? And it's like, you know, a lot of times I'm like, I have no idea. Other times I don't want to say anything, because I'm like, well, what if I say, well, you're clearly, you know, a thinker, and they're like, oh, I thought I was a feeler, now I'm offended. So yeah, but it's funny because with play last and people being so interested in the YouTube side of it, that can be a bit draining, because I almost don't want to get into that conversation sometimes, because you have, you know, when you have to catch people up to speed with something and they don't know anything about YouTube, it's a big ask for me in a conversation. So yeah.
Do you refer them to your other channel? I think most people don't know you have like another channel where you like teach like.
Yeah, no, I haven't done that. No. Yeah, it used to be called College of Tuber Studies. Now it's Creator Accelerators, and then I never posted anything on it.
Yeah.
That was me trying to branch out, but didn't have enough material to put out there.
Gotcha. Maybe one day. So Frank, what question would you have for Joyce?
About being blast last and having, because you are blast last, right? I didn't just imagine that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe you did. I'm just kidding.
Because it's like, you know, blast is teaching lessons, in a way. It's communicating. It's telling people what you have figured out. Like in my life, I see it as giving unsolicited advice all the time. So how do you see that at work in your life?
Yeah, it appears in the format that I write more eloquently than I speak. And so when I actually have time to process something, it comes out better than me talking, because I tend to stutter sometimes, say I guess, or use filler words, and also have trouble with communication at times. Yeah, I guess public speaking is something I have to learn, so it's not something that comes naturally. And so I think that's how Blast shows up. And I think another way it shows up too is I try not to be presumptuous of people. And so I don't always feel like I have the right to teach them. And so I wait until I think I know what I'm talking about to tell them about certain things.
Okay, yeah. Well, if it makes you feel better as someone who is Blast first, I don't feel like I am very eloquent at all. So I struggle with speaking too. I think it's really just like, I don't have that hesitation to tell people, hey, here's here's this truth about life that you should know that will help you. So you're saying like you feel uncomfortable doing that unless you're like, I know for sure that I understand this person's situation and this piece of advice will help them out. Or do you still feel uncomfortable at that point?
I will tell them, and if I think that advice will help them, of course I would send it their way. But I tend to, when I speak, you can hear the degree of confidence I have in what I'm saying. So my tonality of confidence is obvious in how accurate I think it is. So do you know in mathematics, you learn about the principle of confidence intervals, and there's like a 90 to 98% chance that that's probably right. You can hear the degree of surety in my voice. And so people oftentimes, I've had people on my YouTube channel tell me, oh, Joyce, I think you lack integrity because you never say things with full confidence. And like, you should just speak with full confidence. And I'm like, to me, that's a lack of integrity to always speak with full confidence because I never feel fully confident. And so I don't want to lie to you about my state of the accuracy of what I think I'm saying is. So a blast can come from knowing all the ways you could be wrong. And so you want to be able to make sure other people know that there's a degree of possible wrongness, just because nothing is for sure. I think it's also me over NTing it to the point where I blast poorly sometimes too.
Okay, yeah, no, that's interesting because I've always wondered about that. It's like, it's weird, like with the TI demon, I worry that I'm wrong, like in decisions, but when I think blasters don't mind BSing, and it's like, well, if I'm wrong with my advice, it's like, I can, I picked that up from somewhere else. My DE picked that up. I can blame someone else for the thing I said. So yeah, the confidence thing, that's very interesting. Like when I think about it now, even if I say I could be wrong here, I will just say whatever advice. And it's like, this is probably right, even though I'm not entirely sure. Interesting.
Yeah, and I do it for respect out of other people too sometimes. So with TI, being a TI savior, I'm creating a crepe cake of logic. It's 30 layers deep. So if I take someone's advice seriously and I add it to my TI framework and it's wrong, then the whole cake sucks. And so it takes a lot of effort to redo the framework and to remake it. And so I fear messing people up in that sense, because I'm like, I don't want to have to make you redo your formula, because that's painful, because the TI is personal. But I think your way of doing it is amazing. All props to it. That's just how I see my view.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, well, neither of us have a choice. That's just the type.
Yeah, so I was thinking about what you guys were saying, and I was like just picking bits and pieces. So for Frank, I think that what I picked up is like, yeah, Frank, you would blast, but the fact that you're saying I am wrong, I mean, I could be wrong. it kind of shows like more like the obsession with accuracy of information. You know, it's like because like I think that the true blaster INFJ are like the consume last because they'll just teach the hell out of you with no context. You know, so not I mean, of course, some of them figure that out. They're like, oh, maybe I should be like consuming. So obviously not everyone, but you know, like in general. And then for Joyce, I like what you said about you can't always blast with full confidence because you that would be like lying, you know, essentially. So I think that's really good. I did notice though that even IJs with blast last can be quite confident at talking once they get started. Like you just take longer to get started, but once you get the ball rolling, I think you're good. I'm dating an INTJ. You know, so my girlfriend is also blast last, same animal stack as Joyce, sleep, consume, play blast, double feminine. And yeah, usually she does that take you along consume talk, you know, which like talks in circles. But when you trigger her, oh my God, she's like so well spoken, you know, it's like NITE, you know, will just slap you in the face, you know, with that. And I've seen her use it before on people and they get rattled. Like I literally see them rattled, you know. So yeah, it's scary. That the blast swing for like the blast last is like scary. And the last point I want to bring up is also I think you can get away with play a lot of times if you don't have blast. And like I don't know, Frank, if you've seen Joyce's channel, but she's like a monster. She interviews like freaking like 8 people at one time, and I'm like, my God, what kind of like super introvert is this? Like interviewing like 8 people in one go. I don't know.
Yeah, I admire that because it would be a nightmare for me just to organize that kind of interview. So yeah, when I see that, I'm like, wow, this is impressive.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that's potentially a power that you could have because you know you guys are both INFJs, right? So you know, I try doing those panel interviews. I do them once in a while, kind of like what Joyce does, and they are nightmare to put together. Like I have anxiety attack putting those together. You know, I know people love them, so I do them for like the viewers. But man, like when I know I have a big panel like series coming up, I'm like, oh my God, my life's gonna suck for like the next while. No, you know, try my self, so it's fine. But yeah. Anyways, guys, so I'm gonna ask you guys like a very deep question and see if you guys I want to see what your take on this. So there's a saying, you are only as strong as your weakest link. All right. And your weakest link is your extrovert sensing for both of you. And both of you have feminine extrovert sensing, which makes it even harder. Alongside with that, Joyce, you have blast last, NIFE, and Frank, you have play last. So what are your thoughts on this saying and how it relates to you personally, you know, with your weakest link? I know both of you do use your fourth animal, which is awesome. That's why you guys are obviously seeing the success that you do. I know, Frank, you call it fake play, but yeah, you're doing it. So whatever, man.
Yeah.
Whatever, man. So who wants to take this question first? Otherwise, I'll pick someone.
I'll go first. I'll jump in.
Okay, go for it.
I'll blast my way through it. Only as strong as your weakest link. Well, I think it comes back to the classic OP kind of teachings where it's like you can get by on your saviors for a long time. You can kind of skate through, but there's going to be a point, if not several points throughout your life, where you have to, you know, deal with that inferior function. You have to pay the piper at some point. So for extroverted sensing, because that is just like reality around you, coming at you in real time, it makes it hard to ignore. So I'll be able to, in my own life, how do I see that at work? It's like I'll do as much NIFE and TI as I can, because, you know, working by myself, I think, you know, it's easier for me to use the demon TI when I'm just on my own. Like, you know, I can figure out how to make my own videos and whatever and do it my way, blah, 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 because I don't have people around. As soon as I leave the house or whatever, the SE will come trying to taking its due. even when I'm in the studio, when stuff breaks down or whatever. So I think it is a thing where you have to be paying attention to that weakest link, because it will come out of nowhere, as Joyce found out today, at the worst time. And I went on my honeymoon to Italy a month ago. And there was a point in Rome where we had to turn in a rental car, and nobody told me that the gas stations over there are different than they are over here. So suddenly I'm like in this situation where I've got to figure out how to pay for gas, and then we pay, and it's not even like a regular station. It's just one pump on the side of the road. And so we pull up and we're putting money in it. I can't get it to work. And I was having like a true meltdown in that moment. And it's, it was a really dumb thing to get upset about looking back on it. But to broaden that out to everyone in their type, if you allow yourself to get into those freakouts over things that other people would say, that's stupid, don't do that. You're going, there's no reason for that amount of suffering, because it's self-inflicted at a certain point because you didn't pay attention to that weakest link. I guess what all that is to say is, yes, you can get by long enough, but it will swing back and hit you.
Right. I guess that like that fourth function at the bottom there, that is like the tax collector, and then when you don't use it, it means you're like evading taxes, and and something's gonna come after you, no matter how much you evade it, What's that saying that they have? It's like the only thing guaranteed in life is death and taxes or something. So yeah. So that fourth function can cause both, death or something bad will happen. What about the play last part, Frank? So that's also one of your weakest link. I know you've been practicing it in your channel, and actually I noticed that you've been kind of playing with fire lately. Like you had like a buddy in some of your videos, and I was like, oh, what the? There's another person in your video. So I'm like, oh, he's adding some play, like real play now. Like what's going on?
Yeah, I have avoided collaborations for a long time because I just don't want to do it. Like it's nice in theory, but then in practice, it's like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Why did I do this? So, and it really comes down to like you can't force someone else to conform to your plans, your control. So that's what it is. How does play is the weakest link? I forget if I think at some point Dave and Shan were like, your last function is something that you are aware of that is causing all the problems in your life, but your last animal is something that everyone else is aware of. I think that's what they said. Maybe I'm getting it mixed up, but so it's a little more difficult for me to see play as being the weakest link. Like I feel the pain of play, which is why I avoid it. But I don't know how much I necessarily see the issues that it causes. I mean, to me, it's like I feel guilty when I don't like respond to text messages or emails or whatever. So that can cause problems, but maybe a lot of it's happening behind closed doors. People are like, Frank, he's not playing. So it's hard to speak on that level.
Yeah, they're gonna be waiting outside your house ready to jump you, like
yeah
that's the tidal wave. All right, what about for you, Joyce? Same question.
The weakest link, we can start with blast. So the ways in which blast affects me is sometimes you feel like everything good has already been said. And so it's like, well, why talk? Because everyone's already said such amazing things. And so that can get in the way of me actually providing and teaching what I have to teach. And so there can be that. And in terms of extroverted sensing being the weakest link, it's tough because adapting and improvising can be quite jarring, a la this room right here. And sometimes the best way to go and face your fear is to go through it. And just like those TV shows where if there's someone afraid of pickles, like you see them actually being exposed to pickles on those reality TV shows, exposure therapy is a huge thing. And so I heavily believe in, if something is your weakest link, you try to face your fears and expose yourself to it so that you develop your weaker links. It's like if your natural hand is your right hand, but you want to get better writing with your left hand, you can try your best to learn how to write with your left hand. And that's what Carl Jung wanted us to do with type. Type shows us the areas in which we're one-sided, and so that we can learn to be more individuated by being able to well-round ourselves. And so I think with our weakest links, they're also our greatest potential points. They're our greatest opportunities in disguise. And so it's just an area of gold waiting to be mined of the gold. Although it can be tough because our weakest spots hurt our ego. So we sometimes have to come to terms with certain things where we feel insufficient at, and we have to try not to blame outside sources too much. Because when there's a hurt, like, oh wow, I messed this up, or this situation went wrong, there is a human impulse to seek to externally project it, which is what Carl Jung's work also teaches us, that human beings are very prone to projection. And so when we learn about our weakest link, we learn that sometimes our problems, the common denominator is us, and that it allows us to take personal responsibility for our lives when we realize that it's not just the world with weaknesses, it's us who carries it too, and that we can work on it. And so there's an empowering side that once you've identified it, you can now cure it. Because once you know someone has cancer, then you can then put them through chemotherapy. But it's not until you know that they have it that you can actually treat it.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, Joyce. I like that one a lot. And I also wanted to add in what Frank said earlier, where your fourth animal is the one that affects other people. I think that's also a big one that I was just thinking about, like throughout both your explanations there. Yeah, like even for myself, when I learned about like my SF sleep loss, I was like, oh geez, like I have all this like negative emotion that I haven't processed, and like when I interact with other people, it comes out, it leaks out, and I was thinking about like the whole NF thing, and I'm like, the NF vibe is all about making sure that you're okay. If you're not okay, you're gonna give it to everyone else. It's like contagious, like the energy is contagious, right? So it's like, so now I'm like, okay, I need to set aside time to sleep process. Otherwise, things are gonna go bad. Which leads us to the next question: sleep processing. You guys are both high sleep. Frank, you're double activated NT sleep, and Joyce, your lead NT. So I think I prepared a question for you guys here. So do you guys feel a sense of confidence from having, for Frank, double activated NT sleep, and then for Joyce, same thing, but lead NT sleep? So yeah, go for it, guys. Who wants to take this first, by the way? Let's go with Joyce first, because Frank went first last night.
Yeah, so the sense of confidence we have with our NT functions, right?
Yeah, because you've over like processed your identity, so you know yourself really well, and then yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the sense, there is a sense of knowing thyself, so that's what personal growth is all about. It's about getting to know yourself on a more intimate level. And I feel like the NT sleep really helps us parse through the things in life that have no clear answers, but we kind of want to figure them out, whether it is about human nature or relationships or about something somewhere. We're confident in our ability to guess and speculate. And so I'm very confident about my ability to pattern into something, even if eventually that pattern might actually be wrong. Like, it's my natural impulse to guess how things are going to go. And so there's this confidence with future pacing. There's this confidence with the ability to imagine a better world. Because when you can NT puzzle things out, you can also see how things could be NT better in the world. And so there's this deep desire for a better world sometimes when you can see what the world should be and what the world is. Then there's this natural idealism from being able to understand the best logical situation you could get yourself in, or like how things abstractly could go in the best possible way. And I don't know, being confident in the NT is being confident in what doesn't exist yet. And so there can be this already conviction behind something that hasn't been proved. So it's like, this could be it, even if no one else believes in it. So sometimes with NT thoughts, it's hard to find someone to NT banter with, because it's hard to find someone who is able to entertain the unprovable or entertain the unknowable. And so being an NT or having a strong sense of NT identity it can be hard to find your tribe, because it's a mother tongue that requires you to talk about things that you can't really see or hear or concretely experience. And so you're discussing what's invisible to the eye. And that's what is beautiful about the world and perception. But yeah, that didn't have a blaster conclusion to it that well, but I'll pass things off to Frank.
There's one last thing before you pass it on to Frank. It seems like, Joyce, your NT serves the outer world, which is really nice. So, you said you want to make the world a better place. So you're puzzling things out. And then I also relate a lot to what you said about NT being like a specific language, because I do notice when I talk to other fellow NTs, because I'm also like a weird NT ENFP, I do feel like, oh wow, I'm speaking like I don't have to speak like my second language, like ST or NF or whatever, because I can talk to the NF people too, and like ST and whatnot, but it's like a different language. And I'm stupid at SF, so when I talk to SF people, like those ESFPs, I'm like, I'm so dumb. I don't know. I don't even know. Like they're talking about like fashion and stuff. I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, I'm out of my element here. I can go with the NF and ST people, fine, but those SF, this is like a language I have to learn. So, I guess for you, Joyce, like it seems like you are working at NF as well, even though it's your fourth language. So that's pretty cool. Anyways, on to you, Frank.
Well, confidence. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mentioned earlier that it's like, if a decision is if I'm making a decision, that's when the NT, or at least the T part of it, I'm like, I'm not so confident in that. But if it's like, using the NT to work something out, then yeah, I use it all the time. I think it's like when I'm, in my work on YouTube, I spend a lot of time just trying to figure out what is the next step, like what is the future, but also like looking back on the past patterns, looking at other YouTube channels, and even like beyond YouTube, just like looking at the general patterns of creative people and artists, and seeing how that matches up with what I'm doing. And then I take it and say, well, now that I've started to put together a pattern, what does that mean that I should start doing? How should I start working with that in mind? What is what are the next steps to take, and working that out very intricately. And then at the end, it's like, okay, well, let me just do what the people want. So I think it's been helpful for me to have that double activated sleep pushing everything through, because I think that has grounded me where maybe other people who were more, blast play with feminine extroverted feeling might have been unsure of how to navigate things. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing here, but it's, you see by contrast, sometimes you'll see YouTubers who they rely very much on maybe, their OIDI. And it's like, well, I figured out something, I'm just going to keep doing that same thing. Or they will be, DIOE and be like, well, let me just try a bunch of random stuff. Or they'll be too OE and be like, what do you guys want? They'll like literally leave message, like community posts. What do you want to see next? And it's like, I've never gone to that point, but I put it on myself to NT figure it out. What do the people really want? Let me kind of feel that out, but then figure out what is really going on here. What is the pattern? Why do they want that? And now how do I implement it? And so I do have the confidence in the NT because I'm able to do it on my terms at my pace, and there's not someone looking over my shoulder. And what you see at the end has gone through the filter of the FE, which has decided, okay, this is good enough. So it depends on what situation, if I have confidence or not.
Gotcha.
Like just to explaining this answer, I felt like I needed to have a very TI good reason, and I'm like, I am not feeling good about this answer. So so that's a good explanation of it. Or even just like to keep talking here, I have never I've never won an argument in my life. I have never felt confident in standing on reasons. Like, even if I know them very well and I have them and I've worked through them, it's like, I can't do that, because that's, as soon as the person says, well, that's wrong, I'm like, well, you're probably right. Yeah, I am wrong. Yes. Okay. So situational.
I think if someone would argue with Joyce would argue back, but like she'll do it in like such a friendly way that you don't see her like fighting back with you. She'll be like having like that friendly face while she's like arguing with you, and then it's like, but you don't know, you just got out NT'd,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like stealth, All right. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Frank, in regards to your functions and whatnot. It's very fascinating to hear about your demon TI. I think that's the big one I've learned more about you today. Is like, oh, you're like you don't feel super confident with TI. I think Joyce actually talked to me about that before too. Because Joyce said to me, even though she had Savior TI, it's like third still. So it's not going to be like the ISTP, INTP level, like confidence, and maybe even the ENTPs and ESTPs could probably, like the standard ones at least, would even be more confident. So that's definitely very interesting how the function stack still matters quite a bit. I have last two questions for you guys, and then we'll wrap up the interview, okay? For the sake of time. All right. So quickly, tell me a quick story of when you got super triggered behind the scenes with that SE at the bottom. So, you're both INFJs, you both have object problems, Joyce had one today. Do you have any quick stories? Like, so Frank, you make all those videos, 16 personality types and whatnot, and comedy. I like the aliens ones, I always told you.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I love those alien ones. They're so funny, especially the guy with the glasses. Anyways, so what kind of behind the scenes like problems have you had, like, with that SE at the bottom?
With making panels, sometimes if you're doing a big panel and every person needs to be there for the theme to work and one person doesn't show up when they're supposed to, then it's like, what do I do now? Do I change the panel topic? Or it's a freak out moment because it's the chaos. It comes to strike and you're like, why today? And so that's a freak out moment. Freak out moments can also happen when things don't go according to plan, like what Frank was talking about, the gas pump story. It's like, I could have never planned for this gas pump to be different. And so even with today and the power outage, I always thought I would be secure because my phone has cellular data. So why do I have to worry about internet? I already have phone internet, but everything was off. Like I couldn't even call anyone. And I'm like, every backup plan I had to my backup plans doesn't even work. And I'm like, this sucks. And so I had to improvise, and that was flying by the seat of my pants is not the best feeling. It feels as great as having a drill through your arm. Yeah,
Oh God,
it's quite amazing.
it's quite graphic. All right. All right, and Frank?
Wow. Yeah, so I burned the good gas pump story already. But yeah, I think when it's in the studio here, when technology does me dirty, that's when I have big freakouts, as you know, when my wife's in the other room, she can attest to hearing me, cuss up a storm when stuff goes wrong. So a good example would be that I use like my preferred editing software for video is Final Cut Pro, because it's easy. Like it's not, you don't need to know much. It does a lot of stuff for you because it's an Apple product. And when I started to ship out some videos to editors, they use Premiere Pro, which is an Adobe program that's like very complicated. And I needed to get it in order to, work on the editing. And the program is like, it was a nightmare learning the program. And like, I still have times where I'm trying to do something that would be super simple in Final Cut, but in Premiere, it's like the most difficult thing ever. And I'm like, this is I said to one editor, is like, I will pay you to switch to Final Cut Pro. Just I will buy it for you. And then I will pay you to learn how to use it. Like I was desperate. And it took me a long time. Like now I feel somewhat confident in it, but it's been over a year that I have been using it, and I still have freakouts with it. And it's funny because I was talking to my YouTuber buddy, JJ McCullough, who I think he might be like an ENTP, and he was able to like consume the how to use Premiere in like a day. He was like, whatever, I just picked it up, it's easy. And I'm like, what kind of psycho are you? Like, it is not easy. So yeah, the technology in the studio, that's why I try to set up systems so that it's the same thing every time. Even just if I have to move my lights around and set them up again, it's like, this is the worst thing I have to do. Like, it's such a simple thing, but it causes me so much mental distress,
Yeah, hard to relate, Frank. With ENTPs, I feel like they're really good with these observer freakouts, at like the chaos of freakouts that we have. Like basically when all of my internet went off today and yesterday, it was my ENTP friend who was like, oh, it's so easy. Look, you have multiple options. You have that. And I'm like, it's always great to have an EP in your life telling you about all of the options that you actually have in your life, as opposed to just freaking out and going like, I haven't consumed enough to face this.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I can relate with your story, Frank, with the Final Cut Pro stuff and Premiere. I tried switching to Premiere and I was like, nope. It takes so long to render. I couldn't stand it. Like, Yeah. I was like, nope. I can figure it out in Final Cut Pro. Whatever I need to do, I can do it here. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it just gets so slow that I'm just like, why? I just start yelling at the computer. I'm like, no, why? Why are you like this? I never had this problem with Final Cut. Yeah. So yeah, I would not have switched had I not been forced to, which it's like a typical IJ story. I was doing fine, and then life made me do this other thing. Yeah. So yeah.
And you were forced by the tribe too. So yeah. It's so funny.
They liked it. I had to do it.
All right, guys. So for the sake of time, we'll skip the last question. So we'll wrap up the interview from here. So thanks to Joyce and Frank for coming out and doing this interview about the difference between the jumper and standard INFJ. As you can see, you guys are quite different. Not just because you're a boy and girl, but as a type too.
Well, Kendrick, thanks for having us on. We appreciate it. Joyce, it was great to hear your perspective as the jumper type. It was very good.
Awesome. Yeah, we were talking about before this interview started how I really like compliments, and Frank feels really awkward about them because of his tribe above self. Whereas like self above tribe people like compliments, and I'm like, yes, that was great. I'm really happy that we got to do this, and thank you, Kendrick, for setting this all up and creating such a great time.
For sure. Yeah, I do see Frank wince when he gets complimented. So yeah.
I do. I just go like, okay.
Yeah. Don't do it. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.